Yes, sir. Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all for coming back here. I know that we've had quite a decent break over since the last committee meeting. We had a public information session, and then needed to have some time for the public to provide feedback and to gather some input. And so here we are today again. Just getting into it here. Sure. Let's see. Okay. So our goals tonight are to review the survey results, and there's some new materials in your packet. And then there's a draft option E that has been created based on a culmination of the input that you provided over the last several meetings. That's okay. As well as feedback from the public and such. And everybody should have picked up a packet of information. And you'll see in the packet you have your agenda. You have the public information input session survey results. It goes about 17 pages in that. And then after the public input session survey results, you have the packet of information that has the statistics and numbers. And that includes option E in there. And I'll talk a little bit about that. And then you'll notice also in the back, after you get through the public input session and the statistics and the maps, there's a new mapping series back here. And I'll talk about this as well in my presentation. And then finally at the back is a subdivision list of subdivisions and active subdivisions and numbers of developments. So we'd like to review these materials and then give you some time to work in small groups and evaluate the options, and based on input and feedback and just continued knowledge, look at making adjustments to these options that better bring you closer to the overall objectives and criteria. So talking about the timeline, we are here October 17th. We've got 2 more committee meetings after tonight before we go back to the public in December. So we have 5 options on the table right now. Depending on the next couple of meetings, you may end up generating another option or 2 or make refinements to these options. But when we start getting into these last couple of meetings, that we're going to start getting into the process of narrowing down and taking some of these options off the table. So when we get to the December meeting, I'd like to have around 3 options or so to share, or maybe 2, depending on what the consensus of the group is, to share with the public, to start narrowing down the focus and getting down to a smaller number, a more finite number of options. Then in January, we'll be regrouping again after the public input session, after the Christmas break, and then we'll be, that's when you're going to take one final look at the scenarios and options and then make a recommendation at that point. And then from that point on, that process then goes into the hands of the school board, and then you're handing off your recommendations to the school board, and they take it from there. And so I really can't thank you all enough about the hard work you've put in. And I know I've sent you a lot of materials and things, and I really appreciate your time, and we appreciate your time in working through all of this and in evaluating the materials as they come across. So you have the public input session summary. One of the things to remind you is that this is one piece of data. Don't look at this as the overarching final answer in terms of what the public says. It's not intended to be a large vote and the majority wins in per se. You'll see when you start looking through this that a lot of communities approve an option, and then the same number of communities oppose an option. So you really have to look at the scenarios and look at the options and look at the feedback that we continue to receive, and just evaluate things in the big picture and look at what's best for this county as a whole, not what's best for one particular community, one school, or one neighborhood. So it's really important to use this just as another tool to study study the feedback and look at where the public, how the public feels, but not use it solely as the basis for your decision as you continue to work towards a recommendation. The summary of the survey results was very impressive. We had about 200 people at the public input session, and maybe more, maybe a few less. It was a good turnout, but this is the reason why we do this and have an online survey is because we had over 2,000 people respond to the survey and provided input for us. There were over 20,000 comments that were submitted in there. And so I've emailed you the comments as well as the survey. We're not going to print out the comments because it was actually about 630 pages of material. Some of it are just one-liners like approve or dislike or oppose, and then a lot of them had some constructive feedback and such. And so, but a lot of it aligned with what we've been seeing in the realignment emails as we continue your process. But you can see as well that we gave a summary of. We asked them what elementary zone they live in, so you can kind of get an idea on the number of respondents, the people who responded to the survey, and where they live and where they're coming from. And you could see some areas have a few smaller numbers, and then other areas have big numbers. And so that's furthermore the reason why you need to stay focused on the big picture here and look at what's best for all students as you continue to work through a recommendation, and not what's just best for one school or one community. So it's important to understand that the feedback is not evenly distributed, and so you just have to be mindful of that. People provide feedback based on what's best for their neighborhood and what's best for their community, which is human nature. It's what we see in every single community we work in. So you have to just kind of take that and really glean out the constructive feedback that's coming across to see if you can make adjustments that bring us closer to our goals. The public was asked about their overall opinion towards an option in terms of elementary, and I'm wondering if I could shut off this front set of lights here. Is that possible? He's right here. There we go. That's a little bit better. So when we asked the public what their opinion was towards an option, they were able to choose approve, dislike, like, neutral, or oppose. And you can see with each option, there was a good number of people that approve each particular option, but then there was a good number of people that oppose each particular option. And these the approvals and oppositions are coming from different parts of the county and things like that. But you know, you can see there's not just a clear consensus in one option that shoots out that's overwhelmingly approved, and other ones that are overwhelmingly opposed. When we asked them if they were opposed to an option, we asked them what was the reason. And so they could choose enrollment, feeder pattern, neighborhood, and other, and then transportation. One of the things to note with this is in the survey, even if you didn't choose oppose, I think this popped up as well. And so you'll see that a lot of people put other in here because there was no other option. They didn't want to put anything because they may not have opposed it, so they submitted other in there. When I did the survey, I noticed that, and so be mindful of that. And the other ones are high percentages here. I would focus more on the ones that other than other, in terms of people who, if there was any opposition, they would have posted it on the transportation or enrollment, feeder pattern, or neighborhood concerns. We asked the same thing from middle schools to get their, if they approved all the way down to opposed a particular scenario. And you can see that the distribution does vary. About nearly half approve A and B, and then D, and then C had a little bit fewer. And then the oppositions, though, were still on the high side, 20, 30, 40, 30% in terms of people who oppose a particular scenario. And then there were some sprinkled in the middle between just more dislike or neutral or like the actual options. And again, the same themes were asked them. If they opposed the scenario, what was the reason for their opposition? You'll see that a lot of it was transportation was in option A, was the primary reason. And then so when you look at this, you could take a look at at how they lay out and what the reasons are. When you look at it, you can really just see it's kind of balanced. The feedback is pretty balanced across the board in terms of what people, the reasons why they opposed any particular option. Same thing for high school. You can see it's in the same format so that you can see A through D and get the overall opinions and then their reasons if they did have concerns of why they opposed an option, what their reasoning was for opposing a particular option. So we've also organized the data so that you could break it down to understand how each school area feels in terms of approving and opposing and what their thoughts are on the various scenarios. So for each option, we summarized based on their live-in zone when we broke it down by approve and oppose, and then we put up here % approve and % oppose so that you could get a feel for it. You'll see that some of these when I look at this, I can think of specific subdivisions that have provided continual feedback and regarding an option, one option or another. And you can see that in a lot of that shows up on these options. I think Antioch is one where there was a lot of feedback from the Callanwood community, and Callanwood was wanting to go to Antioch. And in some scenarios, they're in Antioch, and in others, they're not. So that's just an example. Another one is in option A for the Kensington zone. You can see that Millbridge is split in Kensington in option A. And you can see here that there's a large number of opposition to option A for Kensington. And that's reflective of primarily reflective of that Millbridge community that has been pretty vocal throughout the process. So there are different different levels of feedback, and what I looked at when I look at this is I look at the % approve and % oppose and see which ones that are on the high side or low side, and kind of look and see how it relates and to the maps. And I've also provided some other information in a mapping format that's I feel is more tangible and easier to understand than looking at the summary charts. So we've provided another update since the last meeting. There's feedback about a community here, Drayton Hall Estates. It's on Crane Road, and it's an area that was one big planning block 113. But this subdivision accesses onto Crane Road, and then the other development, Providence Acres, accesses on Providence Road. And they were talking about the need to split that for transportation efficiency. So this is one where I have made a planning block cut, and it's planning block 446. And so now this is its own planning block because it accesses onto Crane Road. You'll have the maps that you have, the newest maps for option E have this split in there. And the old maps, we're trying to recycle some of the maps so that we're not spending thousands of dollars on plotting. So we have the old maps from public information session. They may not have the split on there, but you can look at the interactive maps that you have in front of you, and they have the planning block split and the counts as well on there, so that you can understand how many students live in each in this planning block, this new planning block. So in addition to the survey information, I have been tracking feedback. As emails come across, I study the email, look and see what the feedback is and what's the nature of their feedback and what their concerns are. And you've seen over time, I've been giving you that little Excel spreadsheet that has a list of the subdivisions for the options and how their concerns are related. I've taken that and keeping it up to date, but I've turned it into a mapping format so that you can understand, because I was looking at it and I was like, okay, it would be really helpful to see how this looks and depicts on a map in terms of visualizing things. But what I've done here is I have color-coded the concerns by community split, disruption, general concern, and transportation. On the map here, so this is option A. The black outlines reflect the elementary boundaries for option A, and then the background color is the middle/high school boundary for option A. So you can see how option A relates, and then you can see what the public's concerns are, or the feedback that we've been receiving as it relates to option A. One other thing to note is sometimes people may say, one community may say, I have a transportation concern. Another one may have another concern about being split, a community split or something like that. And what I've done is I couldn't color code all of them, so I just did the one that was the most prominent one that I have seen. Not to say that the community in a particular area may not have a concern other than transportation in this. But when you look at these, you can start to see the areas that have concerns. The red areas are ones where subdivisions are split. So you've seen some feedback from different subdivisions that are split in the various options, and I've color coded those as red. For example, this is Wellington Woods. Hunter Oaks is over in this area. In option A, it's not split, but in a couple options, we cut the line down Ray Road, and Hunter Oaks is split, so you'll see that colored red in the particular options. Hamilton Place was another one over in this area that's split across down the middle of Rocky Road. And then you have Lawson, and then Millbridge down here. And so you have a variety of subdivisions. And when I created option E, I worked to resolve the subdivision splits and try to keep the subdivisions intact. And so you'll see that was one of the things that I had done in the draft option E. But you can see the orange are ones with transportation concerns. And as you can see, this is the cluster to south of Newtown Road in option A. They're still feeding into Western Union and Parkwood, and they have concerns about transportation to Western Union and Parkwood. These are the ones that include Briarcrest, North and South, and Tuscany, and some of those subdivisions, and as well as ones in Waxhaw that have had concerns. Highgate is up here, and they have concerns about going to Marvin Ridge schools as opposed to Weddington. And there are some schools here in the Rocky River zone, as well as the cluster of buildings communities up off of Lawyers Road and such. So this is something to study so that you can look at, and I'm going to give you guys some time to study this. But this was really informative for me to see, okay, where are the concerns as it relates to the option, and then how do other options help resolve some of those concerns that they may have. We've also provided a list of subdivisions here that have with ongoing developments and the numbers of units. The ones that are active are the ones that are actually where ground is broken. And keep in mind that these developments are it's a moving target. There's activity going on continuously. So this is a point in time as of September in 2017, but not to say that this changes every day. So, but it's something that a committee member had requested and something that we wanted to provide to the full group. I have drafted option E for your review, and this is something that we have in plot format for you to take a look at. This is a scenario that combines multiple scenarios from different areas together. You had provided feedback on your options, the ones you feel are best for each particular school in the last exercise, and I studied those. They were kind of, some of you thought one option was good and others thought another option was good. And so I looked at that, and I also just keeping in mind and looking at the overall process and the zones, I made sort of a hybrid option here that captures some of those concerns that I had mapped out for subdivisions being split and looking at proximity and things like that as well. And so this is option E for your review tonight. And there's this additional series of maps for the middle and high school as well. And it's one thing to note is that not all communities' concerns have been met in this map. There are still communities out there that are unhappy with the maps, and they don't feel like their concerns have been met. And so, it's important to note that, we're looking at things holistically in terms of what's best for the entire county. And I continue to evaluate feedback. But a lot of times when I look at feedback and information, it's something that you should do as well. know that if you address one area's concerns, you have to end up taking students out of another area in order to balance utilization. So you have to really look at the big picture, and if you want to add an area in, what area do you have to take out, and is it closer or further, and looking at trying to solve the puzzle here. You have the 8.5 by 11 maps in your packet, and then we also have the interactive map, shows option E on it as well, and you have your computers in front of you, and you have all these the handouts and things are posted online now, and so you can go online and look at the public is welcome to download and print off these materials, and you can share that information with people who are not here. One thing for housekeeping tonight, if you do want to make comments, we have a new PA system here, so make sure that you talk somewhat closer into the mic when you do talk, and make sure you push the button when you do so. When analyzing the options, I always again I tell you to study the geography, look at the maps, but also look at the tables and look at the numbers where there are imbalances in numbers, or where there may be difference in farther areas, far stretching and things like that in the map, and then start to correlate them together. So before we get into, I'd like to give you guys just a little bit of time to study the survey results, because I don't know if everybody has had time since I emailed them last week. If you have had time to look at them, I wanted to give you that time. But before I give you a break to study the materials and such, before we break into groups, does anybody have any comments or questions or input that they want to provide?
I just have one question. On the A, B, C, and D, am I looking at this right, that there was no more than 2% difference? There's roughly 24 to 26% that approved option A, B, C, and D.
It was very close. It was not a clear consensus on opposition to one particular scenario. So you'll see that a lot of communities felt like all options accomplished. They approve all options, and so they approved everything. And yes, that is correct. It doesn't give you much help in terms of trying to rule one out. There's no clear loser per se in what you've been evaluating so far in terms of A through D.
I just had a question because I filled out the survey so long ago now. In the other section, did that allow you to write in options, or there was a section that let you write in certain comments, right? Yes,
and you can provide other feedback, and that was something that I emailed the committee that feedback, and that should go on, be posted online as well. We didn't print it because it's about that thick of a stack. It's about 600 pages.
But in the other section, somebody put other, that's what allowed access to the
It was you fill out the multiple choice, and then there was a general comment section for each option. Yes, that's right. Mm-hmm. Any other questions or comments that you wanted to make?
So I know that the 20-day attendance numbers have been submitted for the county. Are we expecting a utilization and capacity update to get us better and more accurate numbers based on new information?
That is a good question. The numbers have just come across to me in within the last week, and so we will be updating materials with the new data for the next committee meeting, which is 2 weeks from now. So the next committee meeting, you'll have fresh numbers using the 17-18 data, and the packet will be reflective of 2017-18.
Does that change the projections at all?
The projections have not been modified, and there is Dr. McKibben is doing a forecast evaluation on the projections on the forecasts, but the forecasts are not changing as it sits now. Those forecasts, we're still looking at the forecasts that you have looked at before in terms of forecasted enrollment. We have started to evaluate them, and we can provide you a little forecast evaluation at the next meeting and give you our interpretation of the results versus what's been forecasted. And I'll make note of that to make sure that we provide that to you at the next meeting. Yes, sir.
Have the Union County Public Schools, have they give you like a transportation utilization update, ridership between every elementary, middle school, high school. for the students?
Transportation has reviewed the options. They are still in the process of finalizing the feedback, and so we will have that to you. What I envision is that they're very close at having this, and I'll be sending that to you prior to the next committee meeting. So I'll email you out the transportation feedback and input, and then that'll also be shared and presented at the next committee meeting. But you were asking about ridership, and that may be something different than what I'm talking about.
I want to know approximate ridership for each school.
How many buses are each school serves and such?
And actually how many people ride it
Okay.
per elementary, middle, and high school.
Okay. I'll follow up on that.
When you give us the 20-day numbers, can you give us the deltas? Meaning see where they differed?
Well,
Do you
as it
understand
relates
what
to the options or in the
no, just to give us a sense of where
Okay.
we started, and now that the 20 days are in, how off was it?
Sure. I can do that. Anybody else have any comments? Yes, ma'am.
Just a question. Has any headway been made on the grandfathering discussion?
I don't believe so. So they are aware of it, and I know that there is a sense of urgency to have that, and I know it's a lot of people are asking, and it will help alleviate a lot of concerns from members, but they are aware of it, and they're working on it. Yes, ma'am. So yes, sure.
Did that include the splash programs you're having a discussion when you're having those discussions about grandfathering?
Yes.
So the grandfathering came up a lot, obviously, at the public information sessions, and the realignment criteria I brought up a lot. And the way you read the realignment criteria is we're supposed to allow for a no questions asked grandfathering. So for us not to have direction on grandfathering, there's no way for us to meet that criteria.
Mm-hmm.
So until the board comes to us and gives us what that is, I don't see how we meet that criteria.
That, as I've said, that is more a policy-driven decision. It's part of the listed criteria, but that's really out of your control. As you know, you're not here. You're not just defining the grandfathering policy. It's really something that's one of the elements of the criteria that is really out of your control, and the board is really in charge of that piece of the criteria.
I understand what you're saying, but the criteria is for us to allow. And if we're given the criteria of how they're going to grandfather, couldn't we change how we draw the options to allow for more grandfathering?
It's best to work with. The grandfathering is really a temporary measure. So grandfathering is really something that's not supposed to be a perpetual policy that's forever there. It's really something that's supposed to further reduce the impact. So when you look at, when you're developing your options, you're looking at based on students that live inside the zones, and you're developing scenarios that equalize that. Grandfathering is a method that's trying to reduce the number of people that are impacted as a result of your planning. And the longer it takes for grandfathering to play out, the longer it takes for the numbers that are in these packets to come to fruition.
And I would normally agree with you, but that's not how it was presented to us. It was presented to us as no questions asked grandfathering. So to me, that does not insinuate what you're saying, a temporary. So if that's not the case, we should know about it sooner than later.
Well, I certainly can't speak on behalf of the board, but I do know that grandfathering is usually something that it's a temporary measure that's used to reduce the impact. So just keep that in mind when you're working through scenario development. Focus on the live-in counts and the data that you have in front of you and try to accomplish your objectives and criteria. Yeah, sure. There's a.
I was going to talk in your tie.
Okay.
When I understand your position is very, very, very good. There's a no-holds barred, all wide open grandfather. How long does it last? 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and all that. Conversely, you can have some kind of restriction on it, but going out 1, 2, 3, 4 years. So. And I think your points were well taken. You really can't make a hard decision on what options to go forward on until you know what the grandfather policy is. It's going to be somewhere between those two parameters. So you need the information as quickly as possible so you guys as a committee can get together and say, all right, given this criteria, how it's defined now, this is how we should move forward. And you really can't do it without it. The way it sits right now, it's wide open, but you don't even have a time frame on that too. So the public understands, well, they said, no restrictions, just wide open. Well, they never said how long, and that needs to be answered as well, because it may be wide open for 1 year, 2 years down the line, it may be closed. So that needs to be answered, I think, as well at the same time. Does that help at all? Okay, thank you. Yeah,
and grandfathering is what you're doing is you're providing a recommendation for the end game. When it's said and done, this is what we recommend the boundaries should be in terms of the realignment. The grandfathering is really a consideration it's trying to figure out how to address the transition phase between current zones now and the final recommended approved options. And so that's really up to the board to determine how they're going to transition and at what magnitude they're going to allow students to grandfather. But really the focus from your standpoint is assuming that these are how the numbers are and how the zones should look based on the criteria and objectives that you have in front of you. And the grandfathering is really something that's really determining how to transition in from current zones into the final zones.
More a statement probably than a question. If this is based too heavily on grandfathering, we could mess around here and be here again for another realignment, simply because you're catering the current realignment, if that was the case, around one specific thing, in this case grandfathering. I see that as something that could lead to more trouble down the road if it's too heavily put in grandfathering. Right. Yeah, give us the parameters, but we can't. I think we will fail future if we put too heavy concentration on an issue like grandfathering, because at some point they're going to be flushed through the system, and then what are we left with?
Did you have a comment?
My concern with the grandfathering is based on the last meeting we had. They're not going to have an answer for grandfathering until right before we submit our final, our decision. And that's my concern, is that we're going to submit our final decision and then they're going to give us for grandfathering, and it's just going to throw a wrench in everything.
From the standpoint of the committee, I would not worry. Don't let the grandfathering decisions influence what you are recommending on this plan. This plan is these are intended to hold for a long time. So these are intended to be designed to be in action long after grandfathering is over. And so really focus on these without a mind on grandfathering, and It would not be a good idea if whatever grandfathering is, if it's very generous and to overload a school because you know students are going to be selecting to go out or underutilize the school. That's not the best thing for you to do. You should focus really on the data that you have in front of you and the objectives and the criteria for the realignment, and then build a plan that's best, and then let the school district figure out how to instill that policy into this process.
So I think this is a really important discussion, and it may be one of the most important in-depth discussions we've had here. And I think part of the concerns I've heard brought up, we need to have room for sort of a temporary, overcrowding, temporary bubble. And that's typically done with mobile classrooms and mobile, so you can temporarily expand the capacity of the school, and that allows that utilization to be tolerable. In the information we have, we don't have a campus maximum capacity. That's a total number of students that can be supported at that facility based on the core of that facility and the ability to put trailers. I know we're currently doing that at a majority of our schools. And so it's very hard to plan without knowing those numbers. And in fact, some of the options that we've been giving are overutilizing schools to the point where we know there's going to be a significant number of mobile classrooms. And we don't have a campus max. We don't know how many mobile classrooms can be supported at each one of those. That kind of information would be very, very helpful for us.
Well, for the standpoint of this realignment study, you have classroom capacity data, so it shows the classroom capacity. We continue to get input and feedback from people who are concerned, and also talking with staff. Staff, every time we get a concern from a member of the public about capacity or something where they may feel that our capacity numbers are overly inflated or underinflated, the staff is going back and following up and researching this. And anytime that we get, if there's any information that leads us to feel that any of these options are going to overload a building and put a school, over its capacity, it's something that we will share with you. I know that some of the buildings we've heard of some concerns about the size of the core versus what the classroom capacity is. And I've evaluated the options, and the options actually reduce enrollment in some of these schools. One of them is a Prospect Elementary. There's been some ongoing feedback about the capacity, assuming some of the smaller 400 square foot room as a classroom. And but when you look at the numbers and the utilization data and statistics in here, you can see that for that example, for that particular school, the enrollment has been reduced in every single option, and so there is not an issue in that particular example. So again, I would just stay focused on the capacity numbers that you have in front of you. Those numbers have been continuously studied by staff, and so they are reliable, and they are the best numbers to work with. You also be mindful, like I told you, about what the district average is in terms of utilization in some of these. And when you're looking at a school, at middle and high school especially, at 100% of that building is going to be very full, and it's going to be a very crowded feeling. And so in those cases, that's something that you need to consider. But you're also looking at other factors. You're looking at forecasted enrollment. And some of these schools, enrollment, and especially in the West End, some of the schools are forecasted to drop by 400 or so students. So you have to look at a multitude of variables as you work through this and try to develop a plan that meets all the criteria as a whole. One of them is current numbers, and one of them is also forecasted in future numbers, so that you can be as So, it's not a task. I know there's a lot of different factors that you're looking at and needing. But I think that the committee, from what I've seen, the numbers that you have, the maps that have been generated to this point are looking good in terms of accomplishing your objectives and the criteria. There are some areas that we've heard concerns of that it can probably be fine-tuned to try to get objectives and criteria, but I do feel like this committee is on the right path and working towards to providing a recommendation.
I just wanted to piggyback kind of what Lee was saying, because I do have some of the concerns about the capacity issues, because as it is, for example, like Marvin, you guys have at 90% capacity, but I know my daughters are in classes where there's 40 kids. So, and in Plan E, you're talking about increasing it to 108%. So I don't know what that's going to look like. Is that going to look like trailers? Are those feasible? I do think that that's a reasonable question to ask.
Well, also keep in mind, if the class size of any particular classroom may not be an accurate. You can't just, if a class has 40 students in it, that doesn't necessarily mean the entire building is overcrowded. There are different classes that are offered and things like that sometimes there's a higher demand for, and even underutilized buildings can have a higher class size because of staffing. If you have an underutilized building, they may have to cut teachers and then off of their staff, and so that you have a reduced number of teachers, and then that raises the class sizes in the buildings. Yeah, it could be a big cohort moving through in one particular grade level, and so yeah, you do have some of those classes that are very large, but if you look at the grand scheme of things in the school, that not every single room is being utilized like that. So so it's hard to take one classroom and one case study and generalize it to the entire building.
So let me just pose the question more directly. Can you provide us with a campus maximum capacity, accounting for mobile classrooms, so that we can account for grandfathering, temporary, student.
We don't have portable. I don't know if we have provided you with a list of portables by school. We can provide you a list of portables by school, but portables are not counted in the capacity here. We're talking about permanent capacity. So I'm going to say this one more time. The capacity numbers that you have in your materials are the capacity numbers to focus on. There are elements of core capacity that can be adjusted based on different factors, but the focus of your study here is looking at the capacity numbers that are in these materials. And you look at the general district average to look at what a utilization rate could be in terms of being equitable. You can look at the forecasted enrollment or decline to see if you want to not bring one to a higher capacity or lower capacity, but bring in another set of capacity numbers in here and have you lose focus on what your task is here. So the capacity numbers that you have are the capacity numbers that you're looking at and examining these options on site at different buildings, and I can talk about and get you a list of portables that exist at each building and how many portables exist. And you're right, they do exist all over. And I believe that we've already provided you material on core capacity as well. And so you have those materials in front of you. That is the material that that you have at your fingertips. We're not running another set of capacity data that factors in portable capacity because that's not best practice. It's best to focus on the permanent capacity at the buildings and not to overload a building and to have students in portables after this is all done. Yes,
Is there going to be updated 5 or 10-year capacity data so that we can see how the impact on these new options? And I'm looking at a snapshot in time here. I don't know what 108% means over a 5 or 10-year period. 1 year blip doesn't mean as much as a 5 or 10-year impact.
Mm-hmm. You have some materials that show the numbers and looking at, it was in a prior meeting, I think it may be in meeting 3 or meeting 2, there was some information that showed the forecast in terms of the change and utilization. When you guys get into your work groups, I'll take a look back at some of the materials and see what we've provided. But you do have the forecasted enrollment numbers. Which areas are declining and which areas are growing and which areas are staying.
We get that, and everybody's reviewed that data. I think it's what are the changes that we've done to the maps due to that forecast.
Okay. Yeah.
We want to see, now that we've made these changes, is it 108% for the next 10 years? there's the 9 in there, and then that goes to, you know, Lee's point about what do we do with trailers. It's much easier to take on trailers for 1 to 2, 3 years if we know there's light at the end of the tunnel.
Right.
If it's going to continue to get worse, then maybe we're making the wrong decisions from a committee perspective.
Well, what I would do as a committee when you're looking at this is look at the forecast based on the options. That is something that's an answer to that question. What I would do is I would look at the forecast on the school that you may have a concern about, and look at what its neighbors are forecasted to look like. What are the neighboring districts' forecasts? Because you're moving areas from neighbor to neighbor when you're doing this data, and so evaluate that. And you know, Dr. McKibben is also looking at these at the numbers and the they're going, and if he has any concerns, he will also bring them to light and share them with you. But as it sits now, I mean, the options are, you know, the changes that are being made on the west end. There's a lot of decline forecast in the west end at all of the schools, the middle and high schools in that area. And so, you know, if you're making a change from one area to another, you're going to be having a similar trend that's occurring. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Okay. 2 things on that. One, Matt's going to re-geocode the 17 data, and that'll give us a fresh snapshot, and you can update your numbers in your charts on the new data, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Secondly, you've got 5 options right now. There's not enough time to do 5 forecast series. It takes about 6 weeks to get one done, and I just couldn't do 5. You're going to change them every time you make a change. You got to change the forecast, things like that. You're reduced to the mass, we call it eyeballing. Okay, we know what's in the planning areas, what's going to happen here, there, and all that. Updating, look what's happening in the evaluation, like. So we'll keep an eye on it, and I keep telling him this may or may not be a good move because you're moving a high growth, low decline area, or a lot of building in it. So you know, keep mindful of that. But it's just physically timed impossible to do 5 new forecast series and 5 new scenarios. So, but we'll keep an eye on it. But you will have upgraded data here. When's your geocode supposed to be done?
It'll be in place for the next committee meeting.
In 2 weeks, and that'll give you a good snapshot right there of what direction it's going, and how the capacities are stacking up next year actual enrollment.
Does anybody want to take some time to review the survey materials? And I know I emailed them last week, but I don't know. I don't want to just assume that everybody had time to study them over the weekend and such. Is there anybody that feels like they'd like to have about 5 to 10 minutes to review the materials as a whole before you break into small groups? Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to break into 3 small groups. There's a set of maps on this table. There's a set of maps in the middle table. And then we have a set of maps on the back table, options A through E. We'd like you to just evaluate these and circle areas that you think that could be refined based on some of the materials that we've provided, particularly some of the subdivision concern maps. That can help kind of give you some guidance on what areas have primary concerns and things like that. Or if you feel it's like you want to give directive like resolve all community splits in this map, you can give me a general directive like that, and I can make adjustments and things like that. Note that some of those big community splits do have like the Hunter Oaks is one. It has a lot of students in the South Array Road versus North Array Road. So just be mindful of those different things, or whatever feedback you want to provide. The focus the goal is to try to make refinements to these maps to see if we can improve them and make them better. If you feel that there's a map that's not depicted here that you feel needs to be explored, then by all means give us that input, and we will create we can create additional maps for you based on your input. If you feel there's one community that's been vocal about concerns that you feel it's important for us to look at, or if you don't feel like an area's concerns are met with any of these options, then certainly give us that feedback and we can generate additional maps for you. Okay. So I'm just going to do this time I want to do a random group selection so that you kind of have some unique perspectives from different people and from different areas, because again, you're looking big picture here and looking at a holistic for the whole county. So we'll start here and we'll do group 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. Okay. And group 1 can just take this table, group 2 can take this table, and group 3 can take this table back here. And what group were you, Lee? 2. Okay, you're group 3. Yes, ma'am. Oh, yeah, sure. No problem. This, hold off. Really more for as needed. Okay, it's 7:30 right now. Why don't you guys take make five more minutes to finalize your thoughts in your notes and mark up what you want, and just solidify your comments and your thoughts. In about five or 10 minutes, we'll regroup and discuss your comments and thoughts. I know. Yeah. It's trying to keep it minimal and, trying to address as many of the factors as you can, knowing that nothing's going to be perfect. You good to go? Back. Okay, guys, it's 7:41 right now. Maybe if we could, you guys feel like you're at a spot where you can share some of your thoughts? I know that we could probably talk and work on this for hours, but let me see here. How do I turn this on? You know? Is that it? Okay. Okay. All right. So, does a certain group want to go first and just kind of share some of your thoughts and some of your comments and feedback? Yeah, if you could just come out here so everyone can see.
So we focus mostly on option E, obviously seeing it for in option A. The things that stood out to me that I kind of raised is I feel like option A and option E are two ends of the student impact spectrum. Option E moves about 5,500 students. Option A moves about half that. So I felt looking at, and we all talked about this, looking at the feedback from the surveys, we can hopefully make some tweaks to option A, cherry pick some of the feedback, and maybe Matthew can make some changes to that and come back with a different option that potentially addresses those concerns, plus still minimizes the overall impact for the number of students that are moved. The notations there, the concession, and we talked about this with a lot of people at the public sessions, some people are okay with split feeding in certain situations. It won't work in all situations, but there's some notations here to Matthew about potentially looking at that to try to minimize the impact. As far as option E, and you may have to speak to this more or help me out, but a lot of this had to do with a lot of feedback from Highgate. That was one of the things that we talked about. And which one? Yes, and basically, if you look at the 16 corridor, right, that is going to drive a lot of the concerns with the Marvin, Weddington, and Cuthbertson clusters, and it may be a lose-lose in some instances, but we tried to make some notations to try to address some of the feedback and some of the concerns, and then hopefully Matthew can come back and maybe make a hybrid of A and E, where we minimize the impact and address some of the concerns that we heard.
Okay.
Want to add?
The only thing I would like to say on E, right here, that is E, yeah, on the E, the Forest Hills District, it's only at 70% capacity now, and with option E, we're still moving some up. And if Forest Hills is at 70% capacity, now I understand the elementary schools are over capacity, but if Forest Hills is already only at 70% capacity, I don't think we would want to move more out of the Forest Hills District.
Okay.
But we're still in the same consensus that if we could do a hybrid between A and E,
Okay.
it has the least amount of impact on the students.
Okay. Let me just take a peek at this and see if I have any questions here. Okay. Okay. So the concept is in E is possibly feed Highgate into Weddington for transportation reasons because of the concerns going down Providence Road to Marvin Ridge. Okay. And then also consider, it says can split feed. So possibly have this feed. Which direction would this particular area go?
So I was just doing some of the math. And
Okay.
so when you're doing some of the math in there, you can split feed some of these communities. The problem is that one of our criteria is not to split feed. So it's a catch-22. So I don't know that that's going to work out, but it's just saying, well, you have some that can go to a different elementary school, but stay with their middle school and high school as a potential compromise. But again, it goes back to the split feeding issue.
Okay. And then some of these, this circle here around this region, what were your thoughts about that? And did you have any thoughts about that particular area?
We talked about that for A, trying to, so I think that comes in with the hybrid, right? Trying to pull some of that where you see A.
Okay.
Newtown where you see Boston.
Okay. And where's your option A, your other markup for option A? Okay. Let's take a look at this. Okay. Okay. So it's the same concept that you were talking about with Highgate in here, but then maybe take less of this area into Cuthbertson so that you don't overload Cuthbertson is the thought. Okay.
And then the Mill Bridge is highlighted there, as well as this area here potentially.
Okay.
From Sandy Ridge.
Okay. Okay.
Again, with the concept of trying to leave people where they are. as much as possible.
Okay. And then I also notice a markup on here with Unionville, have some of this area like you were talking about, the Forest Hills area. Okay. Okay. All right. Does anybody, you guys have any other feedback, any other comments that you'd like to make?
I just had a question because I wasn't able to read all the 641 pages of the comments. Was there something that stood out that said people don't want to do split feeders? Is that something that you could pick out of the comments?
We have heard about areas that are split and concerns about it. I know that there was an option in option A. Callanwood is one that's split. It goes to Antioch and then it feeds into Sun Valley, and it was a 16% split. And there was a lot of feedback about that area splitting and the concerns about that. I think that in a perfect world, a pure feeder is what you would like to achieve. But then sometimes you know, split feeds may help get you closer to the overall objectives that you're trying to achieve. So, yes,
I'll address split feed.
I think so.
Okay. I live in a community that's currently split feed, has been split feed for the last 4 years. It's not fun. When your children are playing with children that they don't know because they don't go to the same school, it's not fun. And going to the pool and they don't know each other, it's really hard to explain to your children. That does split feed children. That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. That split feeds them. That split feeds them. And then you don't go to the same school. When you go to the elementary school, but then you don't go to the same middle school, that is split feed. They go to a different elementary school than they go to middle school. So then when they go to middle school, they don't know anybody.
And that's why when you do have a split feed, that's why when you do, what elementary zone do you live in right now?
They go to a different elementary school, so they're going to school with children, but they continue to go within one neighborhood. So they go to a Waxhaw Elementary, but they go to Cuthbertson Middle. But then the other children that they're going to school with, yeah, it happens to children. It's not fun to explain to your child why everybody that they're the only one in a class that's going to go to Cuthbertson and everybody else in their class is going to go to Parkwood. Okay, so that's a class. That's a split fee. And that's what, when you guys are saying it's a real easy thing to do, it's not an easy thing to do.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, it's not an easy, you have to stop and think about the impact on a child.
Right.
We're not suggesting here. We were suggesting split fees to try to address the community splits in Lawson and Millbridge. So in order to address the community splits in Lawson and Millbridge, there may have to be some communities that split the elementary where the whole community goes to a different elementary.
And keep in mind too, if you do have an elementary that gets split to 2 middle schools, it's best if it's a bigger number, not a very
right now
small
you're looking
percentage.
at like 7%, 8% when you're
Right.
doing split feeds.
Right.
So
And
you have to look at a bigger percentage because right now the split
Right.
feeds we have are like 8%, 7%, 9%.
Right.
And it's got to be a bigger percentage if you're going to do a split feed. Yeah. That's my concern. That's our current split feed. Yeah, you could put that on there. That's a better number. Yeah.
We were looking at split from the standpoint of 50-50.
Right.
Right now our percentage.
And that's only to try to alleviate the price.
Thank you.
It's working. Okay, well, since you guys, did you guys have any other comments? And I think it's a good discussion. You know, it's contentious. You're talking about split feeds, and there's a versus driving down busy roads and things like that. It's hard to tackle the different factors, and so you know you have to. And this is where you're starting to realize that no plan is going to be perfect. There's always going to be things that are sort of imperfect in the plan, but you're just trying to build an option that's the best option you can. You guys want to go next?
So we have a lot of the same items that they had kind of starting over here. Just making this curved. There's a few neighborhoods, moving them back to Westtown or Western Union and back to Parkwood. Correct? And that was a couple of the emails that we got. So this little section, and then over here, there was some emails in the Piedmont district, the Unionville area. They have long-term been Unionville, and they want to stay Unionville and stay in Piedmont. They don't want to move to Porter Ridge. So we circled that and addressed that as well. And what is the other map? We did basically what they did with Forest Hill. Brought some more neighborhoods from Piedmont into Forest Hills. There's a lake that was pointed out, and I think they would like the whole kids or the whole group to stay together.
Yes.
It's on the right and left side of that
And
lake.
yes, and that's one that I've heard in several groups, and that's an area that to Wingate Elementary Zone, Unionville stretches down to give Wingate relief. But part of Wingate still goes to, or part of Unionville goes to Forest Hills, and in the data it does show a small split. If we did make that adjustment, like you said, it would increase the numbers, the percentage of split, which goes back to the whole discussion of having a healthier split if possible. And then that would also bring up the utilization at Forest Hills, which was discussed over in this group. So there's some consistencies in that.
That area has historically been split for Unionville to Piedmont, Forest Hills for a long time.
Okay.
I think putting that in the Piedmont district is a bad move. My other concern is the area moving some of Monroe into Forest Hills. My concern is traffic, because that's right around the hospital. hospital area. And what maybe that's a potential split area, but that's 110 students.
Okay.
So maybe there's a potential split area there.
And so that is the thought, is have this be this area right here. Okay, you've circled
Is it, well, I put this since there's only just a couple here.
yeah.
Potentially in the Forest Hills, because again, you have a good boundary there for the road.
Yeah.
But then here, it's more of the downtown area, close to the hospital. So in my opinion, there's an opportunity for a split there. I understand Monroe is further up with capacity than Forest Hills is, but you're going to run into a traffic issue in that area.
Mm-hmm. And that's an area that's either in Rock Rest or Benton Heights, so it could possibly be an adjustment made at the elementary level that carries over to the middle and high level as well.
There was a elementary map I thought I had marked up addressing that area, and I apologize.
That's okay.
I thought it was
There's
E or A for elementary. But I don't see that I'm marking it. Oh, I think I'm marking it in red. I probably didn't read it. Oh, right here. There are some areas that, in my opinion, again, going by road boundaries, that could potentially be split from Marshville, which is above capacity, down to Union, which is below capacity, and can help too here in the Rock Rest area.
Okay.
Again,
So
using roads as boundaries.
okay. So possibly look at some more areas out of Marshville into Union.
And Rock Rest potentially into Union, because Rock Rest is also running above capacity.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
In this side of the county, the distance isn't as much of an issue because the traffic isn't as much of an issue.
Okay. And then what about up here? Some of this these thoughts.
Again, potential split areas.
Okay.
I know personally, 5th grade year, I went to New Salem and I split to Forest Hills, while everybody else, there were 5 kids in my class that went to Forest Hills, the rest went to Piedmont. So I think there's an opportunity to be some natural bound there again.
Okay. Okay. To bring up and possibly split this and send some more to Fairview.
More to Fairview and more down to Marshville, since you're potentially taking some from
Okay.
Marshville to Union.
Okay. Okay. Do you guys have any other thoughts or comments? Did you guys have any map that you gravitated to more than others, or as you just kind of evaluating all of them as a whole, or any other thoughts?
When you showed us the issues, with where the transportation and stuff is, E seemed like it alleviated a lot of the transportation issues.
Mm-hmm.
Even though it affected a lot more students, that issue seemed like it was resolved wholeheartedly, even though more students were affected.
Mm-hmm. Right, right.
So we kind of gravitated to that without looking at the sheer numbers right away.
Yeah, and I think, one of the things that we kind of realized too is, depending upon which side of the county and which cluster you're focused on, where you're at, it has a differing opinion on that as well. Because I kind of concur with Group 1. There's probably some hybrid between A and E that better fits that side along the Providence Road corridor, impacting less students, because that's, going back to the premise of this, we want to impact as few students as possible while addressing some of the transportation issues. And so there's got to be some give and take or compromise in there on that side that then can also address some of the issues on the eastern part of the county, because it's
okay.
We're robbing Peter to pay Paul at some point.
Right.
So somebody's going to be impacted. How do we minimize that?
So you liked A a little bit more on the west end, and then it seems that overall A was better on the west end from your perspective. Right. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah, it's not perfect, but it's close. It's
Okay.
closest, at least, that we've seen for that, for that specific part of the county.
Okay. 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 Well, that's good. That's good input. I can certainly work with that. Do you guys have any comments or any thoughts about the options?
I think all of us are concerned about the same things. I mean, we're based on criteria, and all of us, I think, have taken the time to know where the concerns are, and we're trying to address them as best as possible. And I think that's where this hybrid of, can we merge things together? Because once again, as you said, we can't make everybody happy, but how can we make it the least amount of impact and make this as smooth as possible? So we were definitely, there's a few things that we were moving some kids down to Parkwood. We did the Forest Hills change like they did as well. Trying to look at the Unionville grouping because we understand that's where you've lived and what you want to do. It's just like we've always done. Every time we move, we're impacting large numbers of students. And so it makes shifts really hard when you're trying to make sure that we're meeting the criteria to move forward.
Right. And then as I think every group was struggling with, okay, we want to move this area, say from Porter Ridge back to Unionville, but that's 80 students.
Right.
And so then you move those 80 students back into Unionville, then Unionville's overcrowded. And then how do you bring them, back into line in terms of utilization? And Unionville is an older building and things like that, other things to factor in. So it's certainly not easy.
No, and there's just little snippets that we're trying to address and move, and if this moves here, what would it look like? And I think once you take the three groups and you consensus another map, I think once we look at that, then we understand if these can be moved or not. I think that's the process that's benefiting, is we can make these suggestions and then you show us what that then looks like.
Right.
And so as long as we keep trying different things, I think we're going to go possibly in the right direction. It's just now we're getting to little specific neighborhoods that we're trying to make sure that we're trying to do the right thing.
Right. Absolutely. So are there any other markups that you want to note that you have? I see some other markups, and I just want to make sure I understand and I capture everything in your notes here. So you've got the parts of Forest Hills that we discussed. Okay. Possibly send some of this area, which another group had talked about sending. Talked about sending the Rocky River, this area in Rocky River, back into Parkwood, and there was some feedback about that. Okay, and then this area. What about this area right here into Cuthbertson? What are your thoughts on that?
That was one of the areas we got a lot of emails on that area. So we were trying to figure out if we didn't shift that one. Monroe Middle is looking really high considering it's going up 11% over the forecast. So we were trying to figure out, well, how could we relieve Monroe Middle? So we looked at maybe moving this neighborhood, and then if this one got to stay at Cuthbertson, it would almost be like a swap.
Okay.
It would relieve Monroe Middle. It would keep the neighborhood where it's at here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like a two-part shift. This down and that up.
Same number. Right.
Okay. All right. So it sounds like there is some consensus among the comments and feedback that looking at E on the east end is something that has some merit. It has some strength with some adjustments. And then did you guys have any discussions about A in terms of A? Or did you evaluate just mainly look at E in this perspective?
A, we didn't look at. We looked at E because that was the newest one. And just in my opinion, A has some transportation issues that aren't addressed. I mean, mostly along like the Highway 16 corridor, there's neighborhoods going like 11 miles and they have a school 3 miles, that kind of thing in A. So we just focused on E since that was the newest.
Okay.
I was gonna say it looks like we circled the same areas that were circled elsewhere. So
yeah,
I kind of know where the balancing act is going. I think that there's merits to moving less kids. being
Mhm.
less. But there's also merits in sort of solving problems throughout the county. And I think that we can't solve problems in one area by shoving them off onto another area. And that's where the really hard
Mhm.
balancing act really comes in.
Mhm.
But we did look
Yeah.
a lot at split feeders, but at sort of balanced splits,
Mhm.
where you make sure we're not, cutting through a neighborhood.
Okay.
Or trying to fix areas where that has been the case in the past.
Okay. Okay. Well, I think that I have enough feedback from you to take a look at the maps and see if I can't create a hybrid that picks up some of this feedback. When we get into the next meeting, we have 2 more meetings before we go to the public information session in December. So when we get to the next meeting, I'll probably bring an extra 1 map back, another map, an option F that has components of hybrids of this, and I'll look and see about making the adjustments based on your comments to see what's feasible in terms of utilization and things like that. And then when we get to that meeting, we'll be evaluating those maps, and then really I think at that meeting we'll probably start looking at taking off, ruling out a couple of options. So probably taking off 2, maybe even 3 options depending on how the stickers fall. So we'll do another round of sticker exercises at the next committee meeting to start ruling things out. Still being able to have some of the options on the table for consideration for specific schools, but starting to get down to a smaller number of maps that you can start honing in your focus on a smaller set of options. But I do appreciate your feedback. Your input has been really good, and I think that we're getting there. I think that you can see that the number of tweaks and adjustments aren't as extensive as we start getting closer to the end. And I think that you're really starting to understand that with every time you move an area one place, you have to move an area out, and that it's really difficult. And as you start to keep continuing to make changes, you start coming back to another option that's already on the table. And so but you guys are doing a great job, and let's keep up the good work. We have let's take a look at the final couple of slides. We're regrouping in 2 weeks, and that's going to be Thursday, November the 2nd. And so at that meeting, I'll be bringing you an extra another option as a result of your input, and then we will start narrowing things down and then also fine tuning as we go. Yes, sir.
When you create that F, can you put on there hybrid between A and E so that they know it's not a brand new creation standalone, but it is a hybrid between A and E. So when they view F, they'll look at it from that perspective and not as if it's some new thing created.
Yes, I'll make a note on the plot that it is a hybrid between A and E. Absolutely. Do you guys have any other thoughts? Yes, ma'am.
Would it be possible to have the big maps placed somewhere for us to go and view? It's so helpful to have them large to interact with, along with the
data.
With the data, right? Somewhere where we could go throughout the week or something.
Yeah. I'll talk with the district about that, and I'll follow up with you in an email to see if there's some place that you could have them, or maybe it's even if you want. I'll talk with the district to figure out some way to put the large maps in your hands. One of the things that I use extensively, more so than the maps as a tool, is the interactive map, and that online interactive map, because you can zoom in on an area, you could toggle on and off the different options, and it can be very, very informative. You can see aerial imagery, you can turn on subdivisions, and so I would encourage you to also use that as a resource. But I will follow up in terms of getting you access to some maps, large scale maps that you can use in between meetings.
Yeah, and I agree. Using it online is a great feature to do, but as it makes it hard if you're looking at, well, what if we move these kids, or what if these kids stay, and then you start looking out further and further, like you were saying, if one set moves, then another set has to come from somewhere or move out. So that's the benefit.
Right,
in my
right.
opinion.
Does anybody else want to make any comments before we let you go home tonight? Okay. Well, thank you all for your time, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. Okay.